action man as well. And Peter didn't go into much detail like Luke and Matthew would have done, while Matthew copied approximately 60% of Mark's gospel and Luke approximately 80%. So they got their sources from Mark. And for a long time, Mark was looked on as the, if you like, the dunce or the least expert of the writers of the Gospels. But in fact, Mark's account is by far the most accurate. And he was reflecting what St. Peter had told him. And he didn't go in for much detail. He just got straight to the point. And Mark was very much, Mark doesn't deal with any of the infancy narratives. He deals solely with the public ministry of Jesus. And here we see, so Mark is dealing with the time from 30 years to 33 years, the 3 years of his public ministry. And Mark's gospel is divided into 4 parts. The first part is establishing the identity of Jesus as the Son of Man, the Son of God, the Messiah. And then it moves into the second part of chapters 1 to about 7, chapter 7, verse 30, 34, where Jesus is traveling around his own native country of Galilee. And then from middle of chapter 7 to chapter 14, he's moving outside Galilee and he's starting his journey to Jerusalem. And that, in fact, where we're picking up the story now, it's in chapter 9. So this is, he's outside of Galilee, his hometown, his home country where people knew him. And now he's starting out to Jerusalem, where he's going to meet his passion and death. Okay, so, and Mark's gospel again is all to do with discipleship. And in fact, if we can place ourselves in Mark's gospel tonight, in chapter 9, and see ourselves as we're there, live and living color, alongside Jesus as he's going through these experiences. Okay, so I have screen sharing, so I'm going to, no. I just want to get my, now can you see that?
No, Don, we can't see it.
You can see it, okay. Well, I hit screen sharing again, so hold on. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can see it, Don.
Okay. Right now I'll just take this bar out of my way here. Put it somewhere out of the way. Now. Thank God. Okay. So now. So St. Mark's Gospel, chapter 9, and the first section in this chapter is the Transfiguration. And the Transfiguration means, in ordinary English, it means like a transformation. And it gets its name from, it starts off by Jesus saying to his disciples, "Truly I say to you, there are some of those who are standing here who will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God when it has come with power." And the disciples really couldn't get their heads around what Jesus was talking about here. And next, 6 days later, that Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John and brought them up to a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his garments became radiant and exceedingly white, as no launderer here on earth can whiten them. And Elijah appeared to them along with Moses, and they were talking with Jesus. And this must have been some experience for Peter, James, and John to see this sight. And Peter responded and said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good that we're here. Let's make 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses and one for Elijah. For he did not know how to reply, for they became terrified. And then a cloud formed overshadowing them, and a voice came out of the cloud, "This is my beloved Son, listen to him." And suddenly they looked around and saw no one with them anymore except Jesus alone. And I was saying earlier on about entering into the story. So you put yourself into this gospel that you're Peter, James, and John, Pater, Seamus, Agus, Sean, put you and me, let's enter into this story, and we're with Jesus walking up that mountain. And Jesus is saying to each one of us, "This is my beloved Son, listen to him." And Jesus is giving each one of us that invitation this evening to listen to Jesus. And the hardest thing to do in life is to listen. And in the spiritual life, obedience to God's laws as commandments is the first principle of spiritual life, is the principle of obedience. And obedere comes from the Latin word, and it means to listen. So if we put in there, listen to him, if we translate that back into Latin, it says, be obedient to him. And to keep saying, I can't say often enough that the secret to happiness is obedience. That when God's will and our will come together, that's the secret of happiness. And indeed, that invitation is given to each one of us this evening. And when they were coming down from the mountain, he gave them orders not to relate to anyone what they had seen until the Son of Man rose from the dead. And they seized upon that statement, discussing it with one another. So this was a cause of concern for them, because here was Jesus, the man that they've traveled with, that they love so much. And here all of a sudden, he's given indications of his own death, of his own passion, death, and resurrection. So very difficult for them. And it's the same difficulty we have if a really dear friend was telling us they're going to die or they'll be gone in 3 months. We'd be kind of saying, no, don't do that. That can't happen. But Jesus is starting to prepare them now for his arrival into Jerusalem. And again, going back to the previous slide, that as Jesus was transfigured and transformed, that he's giving each one of us that invitation to you and me to be transformed. And he's not only given us the invitation, he's telling us how to do it. By obedience, by listening to him, listening to his word, obeying his commandments, doing his will. And next we move on to, we've seen the power of Jesus again, and we see the healing of a boy with a demoniac spirit. And this, you have to admire the faith of this man. He says to Jesus, "Teacher, I brought you my son because he's a spirit that makes him unable to speak. And whenever it seizes him, it slams him to the ground and he foams at the mouth and grinds his teeth and becomes stiff. And I told your disciples so that they would cast it out, but they couldn't do it." And Jesus answered them and said, "O unbelieving generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring him to me." And here's another time in scripture where you see Jesus just losing his cool, so to speak. And he's really furious with the disciples. He sees the faith of this man here, and the man is saying, "Listen, I brought my son to these guys to your understudies here, and they couldn't do the business. And he says to him, but if you can do anything, and they're the important words here, if you can, just hold on to those. But if you can do anything, he's here saying to Jesus, if you can do anything. And I'm sure he wasn't saying it mockingly. He was saying it in sincerity. But after the experience with his disciples, I'm sure the man himself is beginning to say, you know, these guys weren't up to much. So if you're their boss, well, you know, if you can do anything, well, take pity on us and help us. But Jesus said to him, if you can, all things are possible for the one who believes. And immediately the boy's father cried out and said, I do believe, help my unbelief. So the boy's father's been so ruthlessly honest. I do believe, help my unbelief. And can't you and I say that as well? I do believe, help my unbelief. And just this story here struck me that, you know, if you can, that I told you the story before about the time I came out of hospital and I was sleeping with 5 pillows under my head, with 2 windows wide open, with a fan, an electric fan beside my bed. And I was sleeping practically upright. And the truth is, I was afraid to lie down in case I couldn't catch my breath, in case my lungs wouldn't work, in case I got into that panicky feeling of not being able to breathe. And that was the aftermath of COVID. And I was just so afraid within myself. Nobody knew it. And I told you the story before. I was going to bed at 11:10 one night into my prayer room, and I was afraid to go to bed. That's the real truth. And my friend rang me from Belfast, and she said to me, Katrina Kavanagh, and she said, are you awake? Or she texted me, are you awake? I said, I am. She said, well, she rang me then and she said, I was going to bed and the Holy Spirit gave me a message for you. She says that you're afraid that your lungs mightn't work and you mightn't be able to breathe. She said, but your lungs are fine. She said, the problem is your fear. You are full of fear. And she said, I started praying to God then and say, please heal him, please make him better. And this voice said back to her, and like this gospel here, if you can, this voice said back to her, what do you mean? Oh, please heal him. Why are you begging with me? Of course I can heal him, but claim his healing. Tell Don to claim his healing. Don't be just begging, claim your healing. And like the man in this evening's gospel, if you can, Katrina was saying to him, well, if you can, and could you please heal him? And he's saying, there is no need to beg. Don't beg. Of course I can heal him. You have to claim his healing and tell Don to claim his healing. So she said, you're to claim your healing. And I said, okay. I said, I'm claiming my healing now. Well, I went to bed that night and she said, if you wake up during the night and you get panicky or you're feeling afraid, just claim your healing. And I said, I'm claiming my healing now. And that's it. I slept for the first time in 3 months. And that was a whole turning point in my life. Now, when I'm praying for anybody, I claim healing for them. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm claiming healing. And I know in that claim that God is going to do the very best thing for them. And you might say, does that always work? I was claiming healing for a good friend of mine, Colin Burkett, 61 years of age, double vaccinated, on a ventilator in Blanchardstown Hospital. He died last Friday. And I was saying, Jesus, you said claim the healing, and I was claiming, so what happened here? Was I not claiming properly? And this, I came to understand through an inner voice that all the prayers that were said for him got him into heaven, that he went straight to heaven. And I was led to understand this was a final healing, but the pain was for the people left behind. So I moved from a position of being angry with God to a position of saying, okay, that's a good deal. I tasted heaven myself when I was in hospital. And in many ways, there's a disappointment when you find yourself back on earth, because there's a peace there that is beyond words. So for Colum's sake, he'd arrived in heaven. People left behind, time of sorrow and loss. But God did the best thing for him. And his lungs were so damaged that if he had have survived, he would have had great difficulty breathing. So God was really merciful to him. So we see in this, moving on in this, so for us as disciples, claim the healing, claim it. And we see the next part here. We see Jesus speaking with authority. I command you, come out of him and do not enter him again. I command you. And after crying out and throwing him into terrible convulsions, the spirit came out, and the boy became so much like a corpse that most of them said he's dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and raised him, and he got up. And when he came into the house, his disciples began asking him privately, why is it that we couldn't cast it out? And he said to them, this kind cannot come out by anything except prayer. Now in Luke's gospel, Luke goes the extra step and puts in the bit that's missing, prayer and fasting. And prayer and fasting will shift mountains. Prayer and fasting will go through steel. So as disciples, when we're praying and we really need something to happen, pray and fast. And that's what Our Lady said in Medjugorje, pray and fast on the Wednesday and the Friday. Why Wednesday and Friday? She said Wednesday in preparation for the Eucharist on Thursday, Holy Thursday, the first Mass, and then Friday in thanksgiving for the Eucharist. So one is preparation, and then Friday is thanksgiving. And you might say, well, I was fasting for these people on ventilators, and there's a young man, Carlos, husband of Jane. He's only a young man with 2 young children on a ventilator in James's. And for Teddy O'Connor, a permanent deacon down in the Kerry diocese. And I was fasting, hoping, and I was saying, right, we need to fast and pray. It's the only way through this. That I felt just praying wasn't enough, that this virus was having a field day. And I said, okay, I'm going to have to pray and fast for real power here, to spare their 2 lives and all the lives of people on ventilators. And let's face it, nobody wants to die. People want to spend as much time as they can with their family. And that's the humanity of each one of us. And I've no experience. When I was in hospital, I've no experience of anything. Just if the Lord shown me the floodlights and shown me all the priests and people who were praying for me. So life is precious. So I started praying and fasting for all the people on ventilators and all the people in hospital. And I don't know what God is going to do. And none of us do, but it doesn't prevent us from praying and fasting and asking God for what we want for them, what his family wants, what their families want for them. And that's life, but life here on earth. And while it's for the family, it's the best thing that can happen. So I say that as disciples to pray and fast, pray for God's will. And now I say, well, I don't know what God's will is, but it's not going to stop me asking to spare the lives of these two men, Carlos and Teddy, and for all the other people. And then whatever God does, now I know it's his will and it'll be the right thing for them. So, but that's for each one of us as well as disciples, that we're disciples, we're apostles, we're called to pray. So we saw there Jesus commands with authority. He rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, you mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and do not enter him again. That's real power. And that comes through prayer and fasting. And we were saying last week that in a healing ministry that prayer builds our faith. And we need faith when we're going out to ministry. And we need prayer. And now we see we need fasting as well. And fasting gives us a supernatural power way beyond anything we have ourselves. So prayer and fasting. Now, if not everybody can fast on bread and water, not everybody can fast from food. Just fast from something you really enjoy. It might be watching the television, reading your newspaper, reading your favorite book, whatever it is. Just some fast. Know yourself and know what you can handle. I was fasting last week and I got lightheaded. I said, I have to sit down, I have to drink water, and I have to take bread, I have to eat something, and it's not a pleasant feeling, but just get to know yourself and know that, what you can do and what you can't do. So, and from there they went out and began to go through Galilee, and he did not want anyone to know about it, for he was just teaching his disciples and telling him, the Son of Man is to be handed over to men, and they will kill him. And when he has been killed, he will rise 3 days later. But they did not understand this statement, and they were afraid to ask him. And then the disciples were going on the road, and they were discussing, and Jesus knew, and he called the 12 and said to them, they were discussing, between one another, which of them was the greatest. And he said, the first shall be last. The first shall be last. And he said, whoever receives one child like this in my name receives me, and whoever receives me does not receive me, but him who sent me. So again, one of the paradoxes as disciples, the first shall be last. The greatest among you will be your servant, the person who serves you. Total paradox to the world we're living in. And then there was another example in chapter 9 of the disciple. John said, Teacher, we saw someone casting out demons in your name, and we tried to prevent him because he was not following us. But Jesus said, don't hinder him, for there's no one who will perform a miracle in my name and be able soon afterwards to speak evil of me. For the one who is not against us is for us. And the last one here is again in our road to discipleship, in our road as apostles, that when we're trying to serve the Lord, that, believe me, Satan will have a go at us at every hand's turn. And he will know our weakness, and that's how he'll present sin to us, on our weakest link. And that's what he'll go for, our Achilles heel. So be aware of temptation. Sin is a distortion of reality. And when you find temptation coming on, say the Our Father, and Satan will flee. So whoever causes one of these little ones to believe in me to sin, it's better for him to have a heavy millstone hung round his neck and thrown into the sea. So we're better off as disciples that we have to start recognizing temptation, recognizing what direction sin comes from and temptation comes from. For me, I have to avoid chocolate sweets and cakes and ice creams and stuff. I could happily sit in the cake shop all day and taste every cake in the place. So I have to make sure I avoid that as best I can. So just be aware of our own brokenness, our own sinfulness, and ask God for the grace to heal us at the root of it. Okay, so that's chapter 9. It's a call for each one of us to enter into the story and to take the lessons from it and apply them in our own journey of discipleship. Okay, any questions? Let's see, can I see the chat?
Hello, Don.
Who's that?
This is Anne Carney here.
Anne, how you doing?
I'm good, thank God. Yeah,
Good.
good. Good to hear you and a lovely talk. Really enjoyed it, thanks. Great to see you looking so well.
Well, thanks for all your prayers.
Oh, okay.
Thanks to
Thank you.
God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we keep them up. I have a neighbour here beside me, Kieran Barry, and he's tuning.
Ah, fantastic. Is that Kieran from, are you in Kerry?
No, Selbridge.
Selbridge, fantastic. Ah,
Yeah.
and is Kieran from
I'm a Wexford man in Scorthy.
Wexford, man? Oh, very good. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Aye.
Great, Kieran. Good to meet you.
Aye. Can you explain to me a bit more when you say to claim a healing?
Yes, yeah, it's a good point that what was happening was that on that night, on the 5th of August, which is Our Lady's birthday, by the way, according to the visionaries in Medjugorje, and I'll never forget it because it was one of those real transfiguration moments in my own life that only God and I knew that night that I was afraid to go to bed, and I was afraid of not being able to breathe, and I just didn't know where to go with it. I was sleeping upright for 3 months, and you know, it was an experience I'd never want to go through again, but nevertheless. But when this girl, Katrina Kavanagh, rang me and she said to me, she said, I was pleading with God to heal you. And this voice said to me, why are you begging me? Do you not believe I can do this? And she said, of course, I believe you can do it. He says, well, claim the healing. There is no need to beg. He said, claim the healing for him and tell him to claim the healing also. Tell Don to claim his healing. And she said, you're to claim your healing. And immediately there was no question of doubt in my mind. I knew the Holy Spirit was talking to me because only God and I knew that night what was on my mind. And here was a person ringing me from Belfast, telling me exactly what I was afraid of. She said, this has nothing to do with your lungs. She said, you're afraid your lungs, after being hammered with COVID, that you're afraid you won't be able to breathe. And I said, I am afraid. I said, I'm absolutely terrified. And I said, that's why I'm sleeping with 2 windows open, 5 pillows under me, and an electric fan beside me. And she said, Don, she said, you have to claim it. And I said, I hear you. And I said, I hear you, and I'll be obedient to that. I listened to it, obedere, to listen, to be obedient. I says, I will be obedient to that. I says, from this minute, I said, I am claiming my healing. And I went to bed and I got a night's sleep. And claiming is where you're claiming in real belief. And this comes, Kieran, through. It comes through prayer. Prayer builds our faith. And our faith is built by really knowing and believing that Jesus is going to work in our lives. He is going to do the very best for us, and he is doing the very best for us. So when she said that to me, I said, well, I thought my lungs just weren't, I was afraid they weren't, they could close in on me. She said, no, she said, it's fear is stopping you from breathing. It's not your lungs. And I saw the power in fear. And of course, in the divine mercy, and you see the picture behind me here of Jesus, the divine mercy. And of course, Jesus, I trust in you. And I was like Peter in the boat, nearly afraid to get out and walk on water. And I said to myself, Don, you hypocrite. For 30 years, you're telling people to Jesus, I trust in you. And now he's putting it up to you. Are you choosing trust or are you choosing fear? And she said, trust is the opposite to fear. And she says, you've been choosing fear for 3 months and you've left yourself in this state of not having a night's sleep. And she said, are you going to trust or are you not? And that challenge is for each one of us as well. That was how I failed miserably for 3 months and not trusting. And a terrible price to go to bed every night and not sleep and wake up and be glad to see morning coming, So when I say claim, I mean really, first of all, pray, build your prayer life. That builds your faith life. And with that, with confidence, to trust that Jesus is hearing your prayer and he's going to act and he's going to work on what needs to be done. And that's when I say claim, that's really what I mean.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And easier said than done, Kieran, by the way.
I know.
You really, yeah. But do it, and it's worth doing. I really mean that. Step out. Don't be afraid to pray for people. Don't be afraid to claim healing for people.
Yeah.
And can I say that never in the history of our country, and indeed the world, but of our country, never did Jesus need each one of us. And don't for a minute think you're doing this course for nothing. He has called you by name. He's anointed each one of you. He's called you up to the plate, he says, because he knows that you've got what it takes. And now he needs each one of you. He needs each one of you to really step out in prayer, in faith, in belief, in trust, in hope, and thanksgiving. Every one of you, you're all so badly needed in your families, in your communities. You're beacons of hope, you're beacons of light. All we're seeing is, as I said with my friend 3 months ago, I was telling people on the radio, I was saying, well, the difference now with the double vaccinations is I understand that if people get sick, well, that's fine. They won't end up in ICU and they won't die. And here 3 months later, there's people dying that are double vaccinated. And I'm saying, this wasn't in the script. This isn't what the government told us and encouraging us all to get people to get vaccinated, because I've had COVID. What I have is stronger than any vaccination. So, Luke O'Neill said, if you've had it to the extent, says, it's stronger than any vaccination. So you're fine, and I'm fine. But I thought people once they got the vaccinations, that everybody would be fine. And now I'm saying, I'm going back to Jesus now. After that funeral on Saturday, I was saying, Jesus, I said, you look after us. You be our vaccination. You cover us in your precious blood. You protect us. You look after us and keep us safe. Protect us from the virus and all other evils. And now I'm praying a different prayer and fasting now for people who have COVID. And it doesn't matter vaccination or vaccinated or unvaccinated. I can't see any difference now in the two. I thought Colm dying really shook me to my roots. I said to his wife, this shouldn't have happened. You know, this isn't in the script. This isn't supposed to happen, you know. So it just brought me back to Jesus and and praying with a stronger faith. So
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
oh no, it's good to talk. And I hope, I really hope, I want this to be real. And I want this to be real. Like when I'm sharing my journey, I'm sharing my own brokenness and my own nothingness in the face of God. But I know in spite of that, he's called me not for my ability or my inability, but for my availability. And he's calling each one of you for the same reason. He just wants your yes. And once he has that, he can work wonders. You'll see miracles happening, and you just won't. You'll say, how did that happen? And you couldn't explain it in a month of Sundays, but you're glad it did. And then you just see, recognize the power of Jesus working in each of our lives. And that's what he wants for each one of us on the program. He wants us to believe, and he needs each and every one of us.
Amen. Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
Well, there's 3 on the chat there. I'll just have a look in these questions. Friday in Irish is Anya, which means fast in Irish. And Wednesday is Decadian, the first fast. Oh, that's lovely. And Thursday is the day between the two. Yeah. And somebody's saying to me to turn off screen sharing here. Wait till I do that. Or how do I do that? I don't know.
I think it's grand now.
You sure? Is that
Yeah.
okay? Yeah. So that's good. But I would encourage you for the week ahead just to really seriously have a think. Today is Monday. Have a think for Wednesday and Friday. Just if you can, if you're not accustomed to fasting, just do something small. Just whatever it is, maybe, you know, do just give up something you enjoy. And if you physically can even eat less, not even to give up meals, but gradually move into it, to just eat less at meal times, and maybe don't take a dessert if you're out, or if you're having a cup of tea, well, you know, make a fast on the cream bun or the cake, whatever, you know. And everything helps, everything counts, and it all adds to building power into your prayer life.
Wouldn't it be lovely if we could all fast for those people that are in danger of having COVID and are on COVID and are on the ventilators?
Yeah,
I know there's someone
absolutely.
in England, and she's very good with prayer, and she's on Zoom and she's on a ventilator, and she's a powerful woman, you know, with prayer on Zoom. And if we could all pray do that fasting on Wednesday for all of those that you mentioned, it would be great.
And I guarantee you'll see results, because we're dealing with evil here. This isn't just a virus.
No.
This is evil at its very worst. It's breaking families. It's causing hardship. It's putting people out of business, out of jobs, people in hospitals, people afraid to leave the house. And I had one man rang me on my Radio Maria program, and he said to me that his wife they have 4 children, and his wife was afraid to leave the house. And not only was she afraid to leave the house, but she wouldn't let the 4 children go to school. And that's the extent that fear has gripped our nation. And fear is the opposite to trust. Fear comes from Satan himself. and fear is the opposite to trust. So we're dealing with evil. This isn't just a health virus. It's the coronavirus as such as in America, it's new to us. In America, they've been dealing with it for 20, 30 years. In America, it's a bad flu. A bad flu, that's what it is. And they treat it with ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. But here in Ireland, we've vaccines. And I'm honestly wondering, after my experience the weekend, I came away and said, something wrong here. This man has done everything right, followed all the government advice, and here he is being buried. And I said, there's something wrong. So it's back to Jesus, back to prayer, back to fasting. And in my mind, that's the way forward, you know.
We all got COVID. There was 7 of us got COVID, you know. We all got the coronavirus, yeah. And we were fine after a few days. It sucked the energy out of some of us. Others of us just got a headache, and it was like a bad flu.
Yeah.
And, you know, I find Mass is powerful as well, and to put it all into the chalice.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're doing. And all the kids are fasting this November from sweets and sugar and all that. Just to praise and thank God.
That's powerful. And you'll see the results of their fasting. To see children fasting or children praying, oh my God, they're so close to God. He just loves the little ones, loves them to bits. Well, that's lovely. Yeah, and I'll never know why some people get it. I'm probably one of the healthiest people you'd meet. I would walk a dog twice a day, and I don't smoke. I might have a pint, if I'm lucky, once a month. But I'd be the fittest person you'd meet. So I couldn't understand how I ended up as bad as I was with it. And then other people around me, 3 days and it was gone. You know, other people had it and they didn't even know they had it. And I was saying, how can it affect one person so badly and another then they just carry on and they didn't even notice they'd had it? So I don't know the answer, but I know it brought me on a spiritual journey, which I'm grateful for. And thank God for that. Any other questions?
I was just wondering, have you heard of that warning, John, that they said we're going to get an illumination of consciousness? And then, like you said, if we're in the faith, we'll be able to bring people back, because there'll be 6 weeks of peace that you bring people back, because this is before the setup of the Antichrist, you know? Yeah,
I heard Father Michael Rodriguez speaking about it in Knock.
Yeah.
And he was very certainly clear in his what he had to say. And I think the answer, I think Our Lady, in fact, has given us the answer in Medjugorje. In fact, she has given us the answer and what she's told us to do. You know, the 5 things of praying our rosary. Praying our rosary, going to confession at least once a month.
Be prepared. Yeah.
Be prepared. Go to Holy Mass and receive Holy Communion. Read a scripture and fasting.
Yes. So stick with them. Yeah.
Absolutely. She's as only a mother can, given us the very best of advice.
Yeah, and all the years.
Yeah, absolutely. And she hasn't given up on us.
Nope.
She certainly hasn't. And I'd say to anybody, and I've started to say now even in homilies, that like as clergy, that we're like school teachers preparing students for examinations, but we also will face the same examination at the end of time, and indeed probably with a higher bar, because we're saying, right, I expect more from you. So, you know, what have you been doing about teaching the people about what they're to do and preparing them for the times that are ahead? And the one thing I'd say is we're the only religion in the world that has the 10 exam questions for that final exam, and that's the 10 commandments.
That's very good.
Really, that we're keeping them, and that we're availing of the sacraments. We are so lucky as a Catholic Church. We know the the exam questions before the exam. And he's given us the 7 sacraments as vehicles of grace to bring us through the exam and bring us to heaven. So, I mean, he couldn't do more, but as Padre Pio says, we have to participate in the process. We have to participate in our own salvation and make efforts in our own salvation. And I'd say when I see the warnings and I see in Faustina's diary, she speaks of the 3 days of darkness. And in scripture, 3 days of darkness. So I don't know when it's going to come, but I do know it will come. And all we can do is to be ready, and confession, Holy Mass, rosary, scripture, fasting. And, you know, you can't do any more than that, you know, and keeping the commandments and being obedient to doing his will and being aware of his will in our everyday lives, in all our decisions, saying, God, like, what's your will? What do you want me to do? You know?
But that was lovely what you said, that if you align your will with his, that's the secret to happiness. That was beautiful. Yes. Yes.
Francis Hogan told me that once, and I've never forgotten it, that's the definition of happiness, when the two wills, my will and God's will, come together. And it's something, you know, one of those moments in life that you never forget, and I've never forgotten it.
Thank you.
Just to be ready, and just, as I say, nobody knows the day nor the hour.
Oh.
And at the same time, I feel we should start talking about it so people can make themselves ready.
Yes.
You know, and one of the reasons we don't is that there's the fear that people with scruples would start beating themselves up. And, you know, it's the art of the possible where we're all doing our best. But, like, for us to start beating ourselves up doesn't benefit anybody. Like, we have to function in the world, and we have to get on and live our lives as best we can. And we can only do that with God's grace. And so to know that, just ask God to help us, and he will, you know. So so if anybody has scruples, to say to balance it out in life, it's the art of the possible. It's the middle road, you know. Extremes of anything aren't good, that we just walk a middle road to God of looking after ourselves, our families, saying our prayers. So but do just like the Boy Scouts, be ready and be prepared, and then don't have any fears about anything. I would welcome in the morning if Jesus came. I'd say, delighted to see you, and I'm glad you're here, you know. Now it might be tough, but once we're praying, and that I believe we'll be protected, that we're his followers. I was praying for my own children there recently, because some of them go to Mass and some of them don't, out of the 7. And I felt Our Lady saying, I was saying, well, you know, if all this happens, like, how are they fixed now if they're not going to Mass? But as parents, that not a hair on their head will be touched. Not a hair on their head. And it reminded me of the time, some years back, a friend of mine, his son took his own life. And I was really upset at the time, and I was praying, and I was saying, and I was praying and heard this voice saying to me, after Mass, actually, after communion, I was saying, oh Lord, is he okay? You know? And this voice said to me in my head, it says, his parents' prayers have saved him. So our prayers for our children work, and God has an account of them. That even though the children mightn't be praying themselves, God has an account of our prayers on their behalf. So just to take consolation in that, and not to be afraid or not to be fearful, that God, our prayers cover our whole family. So People often say to me, oh, my son doesn't go to Mass, or my daughter, whatever. And I say, well, once you're coming to Mass, you can bring them all with you spiritually, you know. So even though they're not physically there, we can bring them spiritually with us, and bring them spiritually to communion with us. So, yeah, and it's good to have this open conversation.
Brilliant, yeah.
Yeah. It's good to talk. So, are there any more questions that anybody would like to ask, or just to say something on the souls in purgatory? Here's a good question that was put to me during the week. I got a question in on the radio program, and it said, Deacon, you know, I keep saying, well, the souls in purgatory can help us, we can help them, but they can't help themselves. And a person wrote in a question and said, Deacon Don, where is that written in the magisterium? And I said, that's a good question. I said, you know, I can't remember. I couldn't remember where I saw it. And here, by the grace of God, before I finished the program last Thursday, I got this inspiration to read from a beautiful book by a lady called Susan Tassoni. It's called Saint Faustina's Prayer Book. And that's it there. But she did 12 daily meditations for the souls in purgatory. And she read, and I'll finish on this, but it was a lovely, she said, it was at that time that I asked the Lord for whom else should I pray for. And Jesus said that on the following night, he would let me know for whom I should pray. And the next night, I saw my guardian angel who ordered me to follow him. In a moment, I was in a misty place full of fire, in which there was a great crowd of suffering souls. They were praying fervently, but to no avail for themselves. Only we can come to their aid. The flames which were burning them did not touch me at all. My guardian angel did not leave me for an instant. I asked these souls what their greatest suffering was, and they answered me in one voice that their greatest torment was longing for God. I saw Our Lady visiting the souls in purgatory. The souls call her the Star of the Sea. She brings them refreshment. I wanted to talk with them some more, but my guardian angel beckoned me to leave. We went out of that prison of suffering. I heard an interior voice which said, my mercy does not want this, but justice demands it. Since that time, I am in closer communion with the suffering souls. And that's in paragraph 20 in the diary of Saint Faustina. So I just want to leave on the note, make sure you use your plenary indulgence for the souls in purgatory. And you can nominate a soul. If someone has died belong to you and you're not sure if they've gone to heaven or they might be waiting in purgatory for a time, what you can do is you can offer a full plenary. For the whole month of November, Pope Francis has extended the full plenary indulgence for the entire month of November. So all you have to do is 4 things. One is go to confession, receive Holy Communion in a state of grace, visit a cemetery, and say, "And Our Father, 3 Hail Marys, and the glory be to the Father for the Pope's intentions." And for just fulfilling those 4 conditions, that you can nominate a soul to be released from purgatory. It pays off, like Divine Mercy Sunday, it pays off their entire debt. So they can walk out of purgatory free people where they've no more time to do. And the souls in purgatory will come back and bless you in abundance for your generosity in doing that. So you will be...
Sorry, Don.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I ask,
Sure.
when you visit the cemetery, obviously pray when you are there. Is that what you?
Yeah, yes, pray for the
Yes.
souls there, for the people buried there. Pray for the dead.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And I know there's some people watching who mightn't be able to leave a hospital bed or a nursing home bed. That's okay. Jesus understands that. You can go to confession, receive Holy Communion, and say the Our Father and 3 Hail Marys, and you can make a spiritual visit to a cemetery, and Jesus understands that. And you will get the same plenary indulgence for whoever needs it.
And you could obviously do that more than once then? Is that?
You can do
You
that.
can do as many times.
Yeah, you can do that. You can do that for, for my understanding of it, because I think I know we have a generous God. Certainly, you can do it for, certainly you can nominate a soul for your plenary indulgence. And somebody asked me today, can you go back and do it again and go to confession and Holy Communion and do the visit the cemetery? And I said it's a good question. I said I can see nothing to suggest otherwise. We've a generous God, and he's delighted with somebody coming to claim a soul out of purgatory. So I do it at every opportunity I can. I have to confess, and
Lovely.
I don't mind standing in front of God and saying, I was, if I was breaking the rules, well, I'm glad I broke them, because if there were souls to get out of purgatory, it was worth it, so.
Yeah. Lovely.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So do, for the month of November, do claim your plenary indulgences and do pray for the holy souls, and they'll repay you 1,000-fold.
Wonderful.
Dawn, is it okay to say the prayers in a church, or does it have to be in a graveyard?
Well, if you can say them in a church, but to visit a graveyard, you can visit a graveyard and pray for them. That's what the conditions say, but there's some people that can't get to a graveyard, and that's fine too. But if you can, the conditions are to visit a cemetery, so if you can do that.
Thanks, Tom.
No. Anybody else? No, that's great. Probably time for a cup of tea, I think, is it? We'll have a blessing. We'll have our blessing, and then we'll have a cup of tea.